Welcome back to Rooted in Impact, a United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Gaudiano. In this episode, we're doing something a little different, a mailbag episode. Over the past week, we asked you to send in your questions about United Way, our programs, and the work happening right here in your neighborhoods, and you delivered. I'm here with our Director of Corporate Engagement, Ebony Jeffress. Hi, Ebony.
Hi, Ashley.
Today, apparently, we're opening the mailbag and answering your questions, and I'm going to turn things over to Ebony, who has the privilege of asking some questions, and we'll just jump right into it.
Let's get into it. I'm excited to be here. We have a few questions for you to answer today. So here's the first question, Ashley. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I think.
Okay. I think you've got it. What are some of the biggest challenges families in our region are facing right now when it comes to meeting basic needs?
That's a big one. And it's really a big one because while our basic needs are really the kind of essential things like housing, everybody needs a roof over their head, food, everybody needs to feed themselves, health care, right, to be able to get medical care, both mental and physical care, child care. If you want to be able to work, you need to have good quality child care. Transportation, the ability to get to and from your work or your medical appointments, right? Everybody needs those things and we know what they are. And yet we continue to see the divide between the ability to afford those basic needs and the inability to afford those basic needs get greater and greater and greater. I think housing, without a doubt, is probably the largest concern that we face here in Connecticut, certainly around the country, but here in Connecticut, we don't have enough housing. Mm-hmm. We don't have enough affordable housing. And it has led to things like increased homelessness in our community. The scale of that problem is so huge. There's also the very obvious in this moment, which is food, right? We are seeing more people identify as food insecure, meaning that they feel like in an average month, they can't feed themselves or put food on the table for their families. We're seeing those numbers increase. And I know we'll get into it in a little bit, but as we see federal policy changes to things like SNAP or food stamps, we know that those the crisis really around food insecurity is going to grow even larger. We could keep going down this path. Transportation is certainly a huge concern. I was just up with Data Haven, one of Connecticut's data institutions, looking at the release of their 2025 community well-being data. And one of the things they talked about in that study was how transportation has become an increasingly larger problem with people not being able to do things like access medical appointments because they don't have the ability to get somewhere, right? And I think when you start to think about those basic needs at a really granular level and in your own life, right, the inability to have a roof over your head, to put food on your table, and to seek medical care because you can't get there, right? Those are just the most fundamental, basic needs, essential items. And so we've got, I think, a real crisis. We've made progress in some areas, but we have a real crisis on our hands.
Yeah. Well, just building on that, what would you say are hidden barriers that keep families from accessing help, even when it is available to them?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is certainly stigma, right? Mm. People don't want to ask for help. We see this a lot with the ALICE population, which I know we talked about in a recent episode, right? Asset limited, income constrained, employed, those individuals who live above the federal poverty level, but don't make enough to afford the basic cost of those items we just talked about. Those are individuals who typically feel like they may need supports, but have too much pride, don't feel like they need them enough. And so there's always somebody who maybe needs something more, and so they shouldn't avail themselves of it. So there's a real stigma challenge. We also know that there's just a challenge in accessing resources. So as much as organizations are out there with trusted messengers, right? The kind of peer-to-peer communications from individuals in their community, maybe in their language, trying to make resources available and known. That's really hard. We do a lot of work at United Way to try and help with resource sharing. But it feels like a little bit of a void of knowledge about how and where to access resources. And it was really interesting because, again, at this Data Haven conference this morning, of the people who access SNAP benefits, right? Again, food stamps here in Connecticut, very few have ever used a food pantry. Mm. So you start to think about in a moment like this where those benefits are being cut, this population, only about half of them have ever used or accessed a food pantry, right? There's a real, either, again, a stigma, a lack of understanding that those resources are there and available, or a desire to be able to shop and provide food for their own family, and using a food pantry maybe feels like it takes something so out of their control. And so, I think what we are looking at is both anecdotally what we hear from the clients and individuals we interact with from the nonprofits that we partner with, but also these really great data resources that we have in the state who are shining a spotlight on some of these gaps in where coverage and resources are available and where we need to do more to connect the dots for people who are impacted.
Mm-hmm. Those are all great points that you brought up, Ashley. There's really a lot going on in the political landscape right now. So can you share how recent policy changes or benefit reductions affect households already living on the edge?
That's a doozy of a question because I could sit here and talk about that one for forever. And I was also reminded that not everybody lives and breathes this world all the time. And so I think what I'll do is just highlight maybe two big things happening now, and then we can bring back anything else later and follow up questions if people have them. The first thing is that the government is shut down, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe by the time this episode launches, it won't be, but currently on the 6th of November, the government is shut down. And there are a whole series of implications to the government being shut down. One is that funding streams for certain programs have ended or cannot be accessed. And so that's problem number one. The other is that back a few months ago, Congress passed H.R. 1, and that for some people is known as the Big Beautiful Bill. H.R. 1, they're one and the same. That also had a series of policies that are impacting people, and some of them have gone into effect as of November 1st, 2025. Some of them have a longer phase-in, and so I won't even get to those that have a longer phase-in, meaning that they won't go into effect until 2026 or 2027. But for today, what that means is that food stamps in particular, SNAP, is being impacted. It has been in kind of a back and forth in our court system, which makes the information I'm giving right now both challenging and ever-changing. As of a few days ago, SNAP was not going to be funded at all because of the government shutdown. A district court judge ordered the federal administration to fund SNAP in part. And so right now there's kind of constant conversation about what that means and how much of that program will be funded. Practically, what that means is that on November 1st, the EBT cards, which are like a debit card for food stamps, that those were just not loaded again. So people who get monthly installment or monthly funds loaded on their card, well, they just didn't get November loaded. Mm-hmm. And so, you go to bed on October 31st and you wake up on November 1st and suddenly you have no money, no additional funds to buy food for your family that month.
That's like a fast and furious hard edge to fall over, right? For families.
Fast and furious, right? And so, there was kind of an immediate response to that I can talk about in a second. The other piece is that regardless of the government shutdown and the fact that benefits ended and weren't reloaded on November 1st, the the implications of HR 1 are that a whole bunch of new requirements for eligibility were put into place. So without, again, going into all of them, there were things like work requirements, which were put into place or expanded. So now to access SNAP benefits, you need to meet a certain number of hours in paid or volunteer work. If you're above a certain age, below a certain age, if you're not caring for someone who's disabled, there are some kind of qualifiers in there. There were also changes to SNAP based off of your refugee status, if you're a refugee in this country. And we could go down that rabbit hole further, but regardless of the government shutdown, there are also people who will either see a reduction in their benefits or have lost their benefits entirely because of the legislation that was passed. In Connecticut, it's about 360,000 people who woke up Saturday morning with no benefits anymore. And it is about 30% roughly who, because of HR 1, are seeing a reduction or an elimination in their benefits. And so again, if you just take a second to think about the scale of that, and that has to be absorbed somewhere, right? We can't let people go hungry. We have a deep belief here at United Way that everyone has the right to food, ideally healthy, high quality food. And so, we have stood up a response to that I'm happy to share a little bit more about. And others in the state, other United Ways are all actively working to figure this out. But it's a huge impact on our food pantry system, on our emergency feeding system, because, again, many of these people have never had to access a food pantry in their life. And we're trying to keep people whole and in a dignified way and want to be able to provide funds for them to shop at grocery stores like they've always done, or the local bodega like they've always done. Again, to make sure that there is that dignity in this moment where it almost feels anything but dignified what's happening.
So Ashley, based off what you just shared, can you share a little more information about how the United Way is responding?
Sure. So we launched an initiative called Share the Table, and it is twofold. It's one, a kind of neighbor-to-neighbor food drive initiative where we can match individuals with local food pantries who have opted into this program. It helps us make sure that we are reaching into all pockets of our footprint in our service region, right? Every town. It also helps make sure that food pantries are being stocked with the items that they need or that they want in this moment, and that not every food pantry has room for things like storage. And so it gives us the ability to help do a little bit of that matchmaking. The other part, which is equally as important, is a fundraising side of things, to be able to get cash in the hands of people whose benefits have changed, whose food stamp SNAP benefits have changed, and hope to make them kind of whole for the month of November. We don't know what December will bring, so we're taking this month by month. But through the Alice Fund, which we've talked about, we're able to mobilize dollars really quickly into physical and digital debit cards. And these would be food retail restricted debit cards in the amount that people have lost in their SNAP benefits this month. And so we're actively working on that and fundraising and matchmaking. If people are interested, we can certainly get you more information. And I believe our team will share a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So right now, let's take a quick pause to talk about a way your support is making a real difference in our community right here at United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut.
Across our footprint, families are struggling with rising food costs and reduced SNAP benefits. But together, we can make sure every table has enough to share. Share the Table Connecticut is a community-wide movement uniting local pantries, volunteers, and donors to meet the growing need. You can help by donating groceries, hosting a drive, or donating to the Alice Fund. Every contribution fills a pantry shelf, supports a family, and strengthens the bonds that makes our community resilient. Visit UnitedWayCWC.org to see how you can take a seat at the table and help your neighbors today.
We're back, and we have some fun quick fire questions that we're just going to go through, Ashley and I. Does that sound good, Ashley?
Sounds good. Why not?
All right, let's have a little fun. The first question for you is, what's one thing people always get wrong about United Way?
Oh, you know this one, Ebony. It's my favorite thing to say, which is we're not your grandmother's United Way. We're not the United Way that your grandparents might have thought about. We are fresh and constantly evolving and looking at ways to tackle new challenges. And I think there's just so much creativity and innovation and energy at our United Way. And so we are not your grandmother's United Way.
That's a good one.
I know I need a shirt.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to kick it over to you, Ebony. If you could switch roles for a day, which United Way job would you try on?
So I think I would have to say I would love to jump in with our community impact team. I think they're out, they're in the community, they're making such an impact and really, boots to the ground. And community is really, pulls my heartstrings and where my heart really lies. So I would definitely jump in with our community impact team.
I feel like we should do a little bit of that sometime, like a swap jobs for a day.
Yeah, I think
it might be fun.
It'd be fun. It'd be good.
All right. The next thing is something that we talk about a lot here. Favorite local spot in Coastal and Western Connecticut. So in Fairfield and Litchfield County.
So of course I'm going to go to food because I'm a foodie. So
me too. So we're good.
Good. So I'm going to say Soho Pizzeria in Danbury. That is my go-to pizzeria. They have pizza, they have sandwiches, and my family and I love it.
All right. Well, I'm going to add that to my list. And I am a native Trumbullite. I don't know what I am, but I live in Trumbull.
We can go with that.
And my favorite place is Plaska's Creamery, which has, in my opinion, and I know this is controversial, the best ice cream in this area. So if you go, you need to try either the Donkey Tracks, which is a chocolate-based ice cream, or a cherry dark chocolate chunk ice cream. And they do, in fact, have donkeys at Plaska. So something fun for everyone. I'm sure that there are so many other great spots in Connecticut, in Coastal and Western, but there's a quick one. And maybe people can drop their favorites in the chat of this episode's social, and we can see where else we need to go.
There we go.
All right. So that's a wrap on our very first mailbag episode. I hope that you had fun, Ebony.
I did.
Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We really loved hearing what you're curious about and sharing more of what happens behind the scenes at United Way. If you enjoyed this format, be sure to let us know. And again, maybe drop your favorite local spot in the chat. Send us a message, tag us on social, or leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you have a question we didn't get to, don't worry. We'll be back with another mailbag episode soon. Until next time, I'm Ashley Gaudiano, and this is Rooted in Impact. At United Way of Coastal and Western Connecticut, we work side by side with our community to address critical needs and advance equitable pathways to well-being and financial security for everyone. Rooted in Impact is a podcast that highlights how we are making a difference in our communities. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to learn more about us, visit unitedwaycwc.org. And if you're interested in being our podcast sponsor, we'd love to have you. You can find new episodes every other Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts.